Alicia Michelle lives in California with her family. She's an author, Bible teacher, podcaster, and certified neuro coach. Known as the Mindset Makeover Coach, she goes beyond identifying what mindset issues need to be addressed and actually teaches Christian women how to renew their minds with practical brain and biblically based tools that help them overcome negative thinking and cultivate godly confidence. So, welcome, Alicia.
Hey, hi. So glad to be here.
Oh, it's so fun. Now, you and I had the pleasure of meeting for the first time in Nashville in August of 2021.
Yes.
And so
Yeah,
it's fun to now have you on the podcast and
I
having met you
know.
in
Yeah,
person.
exactly. Yeah, it's always more fun to meet people in person and just hear more about their life and get to know them. So definitely
Yes.
cool.
Yeah. So I'm glad you're here. So that intro gave us a little bit about you, but why don't you tell us a little bit more like where you grew up and maybe things that you enjoy doing for fun, either on your own or with your family?
Sure. So I grew up in Southern California in northern Los Angeles area and ended up going to school in the Midwest. So I have a heart for the Midwest. I love that area, especially this time of year. I know we're recording in fall. So this is the time of year when I just don't like being in California because we don't ever get true fall here. But
Yeah.
I currently live in San Diego, which my husband and I have lived here for over 20 years. We love it.
Mhm.
So we live more like in the country, but still near the ocean. So it's kind of the best of both worlds. And what I love to do, I love to, of course, be with my family and hang out with my kids and cheer them on at sports and things like that. But I'm also a very creative person. So I like to garden. I've recently started learning about square foot gardening. So we have these little raised garden beds in our backyard, which are really fun. And I like to paint. I like to cook. I like to play piano, things like that. So just I think, as I have learned to, I know we're talking about mindsets today, as I've learned to really rejuvenate some of those mindsets, I've found that I rediscovered myself again in those areas
Mm.
that I really like, about who I am, things that I maybe forgotten about or just not allowed myself to do for a long time because I was
Yeah.
so focused on I have to do this, I have to do that. And so it's been great to let God reawaken some of those parts of me in the last few years. So.
Yeah, a rediscovery. Now,
Yeah.
the Midwest is a really big area. So, narrow it down. Where did you go to school?
I went to the University of Missouri, so
Okay.
in Columbia, Missouri. Yeah,
Okay.
so you're in Illinois, right? So not too
Yeah.
far.
No,
Yeah,
not I mean, relatively speaking, yeah, not too
relatively
far.
speaking. Yeah,
It's a
yeah.
good 6, 7 hours down to St. Louis. So,
It is,
it's
yeah,
still a little bit of a
yeah.
drive, but
But I went to school there, and then I lived in St. Louis for a little while and Kansas City both, and, yeah, it was definitely some things that God did in my life to close some doors that brought me back to California, and, I just yeah, I love that part of the world, so makes me
yeah.
happy to be there.
Yay. Well, that's great.
Yay.
Well, I
Yeah.
am excited to talk today with you about
Mm.
mindset. And why don't you just start by telling us a little bit about your story and
Mm.
maybe what it was with mindset that you had to overcome?
Mm. Well, I this could be kind of a long story. I'm gonna try to keep it short because it's like, "Tell me your story." That's a big question.
Yeah. Well, if you have
So
an
I
episode or something we can link
yeah,
to for the details, we can do
for
that also.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just basically to say that I have always kind of been an anxious person, an overthinking what if and kind of trying to control my environment with that kind of a mindset. I grew up in that way. I was just very anxious as a child, and all of that really percolated in me to a point where I was trying to do everything I needed to do to be liked, to be accepted, to be loved, and that included getting good grades and performing for others and making other people like me and looking a certain way. And so all of that, I a lot of that got addressed or some way got addressed when I became a Christian when I was 19. The Lord brought salvation, and that I think that was obviously a huge beginning shift for me, but the true change in terms of mindsets, that didn't come until probably 5 years ago,
Mm.
um, or even probably closer to 4.5 years ago. I still, even though I knew God loved me, I knew He found me worthy, He'd given me a new purpose, I was still living under this idea of I have to achieve to be liked. I have to do all the right things. I have to make sure my kids have to act a certain way for me to be a good mom. All of these beliefs that, we know cognitively aren't correct, but on a subconscious level they were driving the show. And that got to a point to 4 years ago, I ended up having a massive health crisis that nearly took my life. It
Mm.
was, I had 2 vertebral artery dissections, which means that, the arteries that run the back of your neck are the vertebral arteries. If an aneurysm is the vessel exploding outwards, the dissection is it collapsing inwards and it
Wow.
separates. Yeah, so, it not only was closing in the veins, but it was creating all these blood clots on the side and causing extreme headaches. And
Yeah.
these just came out of the blue, and the doctors were like, "Do you do extreme sports? And, were you in a car accident?" "No." Like, so this, again, a big long story with all of that. But after that happened, I knew, because God had said, "Listen, I've been trying to tell you for years that you have been living so overtaxed, so overworked, so just, again, sleeping 4 hours a night and not taking care of yourself." And people would say, "You can't keep going like this." But it's like, I didn't know how to stop doing that. I didn't know
Yeah.
how to just try to be different. And that was the problem. So once I began to go through this long journey of recovering my health, became very clear to me that I needed to not just create some new habits for myself, so to speak. It was like, why are you still, what's driving you to those old habits? What is that about? And that's where the mindset stuff really began to become forefront for me. And that's when I became certified as a neuro coach and learned more about what that means to understand how the brain works. Why do we get
Mm.
stuck in these patterns? And I did that out of my own just desire to help women. I was already a coach at that time, but it was like, I wanna help women understand how to renew their minds in a deeper way than just maybe talking about their feelings and working through things and setting goals. I
Yeah.
wanna understand what's going on, and because I felt like no one is saying that. No one in the church is saying that. We're saying, "Yes, we need to renew our mind," but we're not giving ourselves the tools, and brain science and the Bible line up. So, it's
Yes.
awesome to be able to use that together now to help women from my own experiences on how to do that.
Well, and I was gonna say, I mean, I'm assuming that this is more than just reciting Bible verses over and
Yeah,
over, or smile with your face until you feel it with your
exactly.
heart and all
Oh,
these
yeah.
things that, we hear. So when you
Ah.
say mindset, what
Mhm.
exactly do you mean? Define that for us.
When I say mindset, I mean the the state of your perception, how you are choosing to interpret what's going on around you. And that happens on from a brain science perspective, that happens on 2 levels. There's a subconscious mind that's happening and the logical mind. So the logical mind being the prefrontal cortex. So the what's interesting is that we can have a cognitive thought, but with the subconscious mind already has a pattern set up about how we respond to a certain thing, how we believe about something. Belief is basically a thought and emotion repeated over and over until it creates this like what we call a soundtrack in our
Mhm.
brain. And so if that soundtrack is playing, we can have all the logical thoughts we want, but if it's going to always be overridden by that soundtrack. And so there's 3 key questions that our brain answers from around the ages of 9 to 13. And that is, am I worthy? Am I loved? And am I enough? And we're
Mm.
not logically answering those. That's just answered in our experiences and how we are reinforced in those ways. So for me, I got good grades. I worked really hard. My parents praised me for it. Not that my parents were bad for doing that, but my brain learned, hey, if you work hard and you look a certain way and you act a certain way and you do these right things, then you're worthy. And when that doesn't happen, you're not worthy.
Yeah.
So you have to keep up this pace to be accomplishing and doing the right things. So all that's to say, when those mindset means, are there things inside of us that are on, especially a subconscious level, that are in contrast to the mind of Christ? That we are called to have. We're called to let the Spirit control our thoughts so that we can produce the fruits of the Spirit. We cannot do that if we have thoughts that are in contrast to the Spirit. So again, we have to understand, how do we get those thoughts? Why are they there? And how can we remove them and rewire them? Like you said, more than just saying enough positive affirmations, more than smiling until it feels good. It's a
Mhm.
process that we go through the Christian Mindset Makeover, through coaching that I do. Mainly the biggest process that we use is called brain priming. And that is a scientific process where we're literally pruning away the old soundtrack and
Mm.
we're rebuilding the new soundtrack around that specific thought. And it takes about 63 to 67 days for that to happen on a subconscious level in the brain. So that's the work that
Interesting.
I do
Okay.
with women. Yeah.
So this is related to, but much different than ideology or worldview. I mean, that sort of is
Yeah.
part of it, but this is not, it's not like I remember as a kid, different times where people would say, well, you know better. But that wasn't, it
Oh,
didn't matter if I knew better. It mattered,
exactly.
what I thought or felt.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
okay, well, that's helpful.
Mm.
So in your bio, you referenced that you help Christian women do this in a way that's
Mhm.
both brain based and biblically based. And,
Mhm.
the science is there. We know what science is, but why is it important that it is both, that it's both integrated
Mm.
together?
Well, look, I think it's important just from the reason of, as Christians, we never want to get involved in anything specifically, I mean, especially our brains, right? That is going to be contrary to what God's word says. So I
Mhm,
think it's important to have the knowledge that both support each other, but I don't think that there's a lot of communication happening between both worlds, and that
mm,
in the secular world there is resources that talk about how to do this kind of work from, I mean, so limited point of view, but it's definitely more visible. And then in the church, there is a revival starting of people talking about this, but it's like they aren't giving the science behind it. They're just saying we need to do it. So
mhm.
it's really important, I think, to be able to say, look, God tells us to do it, and we can talk about the reasons for that in a second, but God tells us to do it, and the brain science supports it. So here's how to make it happen. Let's talk about
Yeah.
both of those things. So, why it's important is because our thoughts dictate our results. So,
Mm,
if we
mhm.
are to become and live the way God wants us to, we absolutely have to get to the root of that. We can't just try to fix our decisions. We have to go all the way back to the thoughts. The thoughts create the emotions. The thoughts and the emotions combine to create a belief. The beliefs create the decisions. Decisions create the actions, and the actions create the results. So,
Mhm.
if we want to change the result, we got to go all the way back. And this is the kind of work that not just transforms us, but transforms generations. I
Yeah.
mean, if we can show up as different moms and different wives, we can break these generational curses, things that we have just had passed on to us and learned as part of our normal brain functioning. We have the ability, and we have, I believe, a responsibility from
Mm,
God as the only creatures, literally in creation, who have the ability to stand outside of their brain and decide what to think about. We are the only
mhm,
creatures that have that ability to have a mind and a brain. It's meaning we can decide, I am going to think about this or not think about this.
mhm.
And that's beautiful because that's what God wants us to do. And so
Yeah.
we have to learn how to do that in a way that honors him.
So it's if I'm hearing what you're saying, it's how we think about ourselves, it's how we think about others, but it's really how these thoughts translate into whether it's going to be anxiety and fear or
Mm,
peace and contentment or, bitterness or love or whatever it is.
yeah.
The way we think is going to inform how we end up approaching the people around us and behaving. Is that kind of part of
Yeah,
it?
absolutely. That's part of it. Yeah, and
Okay.
all of those thoughts, we're not saying that we should never have a negative thought. Like for example, when you mention anxiety,
Mhm.
anxiety often starts in the amygdala, which is these two little almond-shaped structures in the brain. And the amygdala is a very helpful part of our anatomy. We need to have that's the fight or flight center. We need to
Yes.
know like if there's a danger, we need to have that. But if the purpose of like that in relationship to say the prefrontal cortex calms it down.
Mhm.
And if there is not that relationship between the two of them, the logic center to learn how to keep it calm, to monitor it, and if it's always been in this constant on pattern, then
Mhm.
it's going to affect how we interact. So my point in saying that is to say like we could have similar situations for two different people, but if somebody has done this kind of work and knows these kind of ways to manage their thoughts and their minds, they're going to have a different response than person B, who is just like, reacting and
Yeah.
dealing with all these things. So yeah, it makes a big difference.
Okay. Yeah. And so it takes those scriptures of, be anxious in nothing and
Mhm.
puts it into a context of, or be anxious for nothing, puts it into a context of it's not that anxiety is wrong. It's a matter of now, how are my thoughts informing my behavior? Because, like you
Right.
said, anxiety can be, or fear can be a useful thing. There's danger,
Sure.
there's something's not right. Um,
Yeah.
but it takes that verse and doesn't make it so legalistic.
Yeah, and so just I think we get into these patterns of beating ourselves up, like,
Yeah.
this is the biggest thing I struggled with, and I see so many women struggle with too, is like, "I know better. I
Mhm.
know I should think different. So just stop thinking like that. Just stop being this way," right? And
Yeah.
that is that is not the way that's effective in handling it. We know that because all of us do it, and how does it work for us? Not very well.
Right.
But it's but it's actually shutting down those parts of ourselves that are like, well, I have a very real reason for feeling like this. Like, I
Mhm.
had this happen to me, or this is a very real thing that could happen. And
Mhm.
so we have to learn how to approach those areas with compassion and curiosity instead of that harshness
Mhm.
of, you need to change and you need to be different. And honestly, that is how Jesus speaks to us. He
Yeah.
doesn't yell at us and tell us, "What's wrong with you? You should know better. Don't do that." I mean, what
Right.
did he say to the woman caught in adultery? He didn't tell her that. He said, he noticed that she was aware of what she had done. And he said,
Mhm.
just go and don't do that again. Right. So
Yeah.
he lovingly says, let me show you a different way.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
It's
it's a
still
different
an
way to approach it.
invitation to change, but it's not
Yeah,
a,
absolutely.
punitive or whatever,
Right. Yeah.
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 So give me just a real high, excuse me, level overview of how you help women do this. What's kind of, the main steps in your process, or what would that look
Sure.
like?
Yeah. So in the Christian Mindset Makeover, it's a it's actually 7 steps process. We take about 9 weeks to go through all the process of the steps. But the first part of the process being identifying and understanding what some of these negative thought patterns are, why they're there, um, and how they interact with truth. So if we are rewiring our thoughts to be in line with truth, then what is that truth that we've defined as truth?
Mhm.
Is it God's truth? And we can say, "Oh, I believe God and I follow God," but what are the thoughts that are inside there? Are they really lining up with God's truth? Not saying that from a judgmental, shame-inducing kind of thing, but just to say, let's take an honest look at where we're at, and then
Mhm.
let's take an honest look at our responsibility in it. How have we perpetuated this by focusing and focusing and focusing, or not addressing it? And what are some things that we just need to let go of, that we have to surrender as
Yeah.
in terms of this process? So we talk through a lot of that. We talk through fear. We talk through why we're in these areas, specifically around those 3 questions. Am I enough? Am I loved? And am I worthy?
Mm.
Then through all of that, we create the brain priming itself. And so brain priming is a specific neurological transformation that we go through by creating a script that we read and listen. Well, we don't have to read it. We listen to it twice a day when the mind is the most open in the subconscious mind. So in the morning and in the evening. And it's a process of going through that and creating that is a script that addresses, acknowledges the feelings of why we have these thoughts, these issues, these core negative thoughts, and determines what's true and what's not true, and then decides, where do I want to dwell? What do I want to live in? So it's more complicated than that, but that's basically the gist of what it is.
Okay.
And then after we're working on that for the 63 to 67 days, and that's slowly switching and changing again, getting rid of the old patterns that are there and creating the new ones. Then we're cultivating the positive side. Like, how can we protect this? What
Mm.
kind of boundaries need to be in place? And that includes everything from self-care and different ways, in the moment, how we can respond to things, how does self-sabotage play a part in it? How do toxic thoughts and behaviors and people play a part in it? And then how can we even enjoy the moment? How does gratitude play a part in it? All these different things. So we're building the soil, so to speak, for
Okay.
these new mindsets to create. So it's this whole process, that it's transformative to
Mhm.
watch women go through it and not just change their thoughts, but again, change behaviors that they don't even really realize are related to it, because when we address these core things, so much gets freed up. So that's kind of a high level overview of
Yeah.
what we call
So
the
are you
transformation method.
addressing, one or two key things and then they now have the skills to do this again with other things? Or are you addressing something so foundational that it just sort of starts to impact everything?
Both. So
Okay.
we try to go as deep as we can. Like I said, usually we try to get to what those three questions are, because those
Yeah.
three questions around worth, identity, and worth, enough, and love. When those three questions are answered, a lot of other thought patterns are just deeply attached to those. So sometimes they address, if they're dealing with, say, worth and being enough, it
Mhm.
might address both of those, but sometimes they're just one at a time is enough, because that's what like, this is big enough. Let me just focus on this first. So it's kind of
Mhm.
depends on each person, but a lot of ladies will go through it, and then because it's not just brain priming, there's all kinds of other tools in there that we talk about.
Mhm.
Because they have forever access to all of it, they can go back in and keep looking at it and keep using these tools and keep working in it, because it's not that we're saying you're going to be perfect after
Right.
going through all these things. You just are going to be able to have healed some of those core things
Mhm.
inside of you that are causing the problems, and you're going to know how to deal with the emotions, and in a way that's honoring them and
Mhm.
honoring God's truth as it comes up. So it's both in the moment and on a deeper level, and they can
Mhm.
keep doing that over and over if they want.
And that's kind of empowering to not just be, "This is just the way I am," but, "Oh,
No.
I understand this now, and I'm choosing
Yeah.
to do it differently." That's great.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
as you shifted, your own mindset and
Mhm.
experienced this transformation, you decided to help other Christian women experience the same freedom. So as you started turning this kind of into a business, what was the hardest thing that you faced when it came to integrating work with home and family?
Well, it was for me that same old struggle that I've always had, which is I have to work hard to
Mhm.
do it right. I have to make sure that I'm killing myself in my business, killing myself as a mom, killing myself in taking care of the house, all of those things. It was that old lie, that old mindset that would start to rise up, and having to believe, look, at the core of everything, if I follow Christ, if I obey him, and I go to him every morning and say, what is it that you have for me in this season? What do you want me to do?
Mhm.
If I do that, then I am successful, period. And so some days that looks more like taking off my work hat and spending my entire day as a mom and helping my kids with homework and taking them, like, for example, my husband's been out of town the last week and a half, and so I've had a lot more of the mom hat on the last
Yeah.
few weeks, because of that. We have a birthday party we're planning tomorrow. We had a cake we had to make, all these different, like, so I think just for me, it's reconciling the two of those. Just
Mhm.
like, I can I am successful regardless of what I do, because I'm accepted by God. And
Mhm.
so if I listen to him today for what I need to do in each of those areas, whatever the balance is, then that's enough and that's good.
Mhm.
That's been what's helpful for me.
Well, that's good. Has there been, something that you found, stumbled upon, a resource or a practice or a tool that kind of helped you keep those priorities of both at top of mind?
Mhm. Yes. So a couple things. First, absolutely being in God's word every day helps
Mhm.
with so many things, but it keeps my it keeps my truth focused on what is true. I mean, it keeps those thoughts and those little mindsets from starting to creep up again of like, you need to work harder, you need to do more, you're not good enough, you're not all these things. So it just reminds me of who I am, fully forgiven, fully loved by God.
Mhm.
And also a practice that I learned from, I'm trying to think of the name of the book. I can't think of it. If it comes to me, I will think of it. But it's called Morning Pages. And it's a practice of every day writing 3 pages worth of just random thoughts that are on your
Mhm.
mind. And I don't do this every day, but on the days when I start to feel like there's a lot of thoughts or emotions bouncing around in my head, it's
Mhm.
such a wonderful way to just, without any need to like make it sound good or whatever, anything. It can be your to-do list. It's just
Mm.
getting that all out. And by being able to move that out of my brain onto paper, I can see what's really there. And it doesn't seem so scary. It doesn't seem so hard. And I can work through it with God in a much better way. So being aware of my emotions and my thoughts and my truth through both of those things, I think has been really, really important for my
Okay.
ongoing health. Yeah.
Yeah, that's helpful. So, consistent time in the Word and this
Mhm.
sort of free-form journaling that is more of a brain dump so you can take an outsider's view of what are you thinking about? Is that
Right. Yeah.
essentially
And
okay.
and just not even and just realize what's there. Sometimes we don't even
Yeah.
know what's there until we really just let it all out. And so,
Yeah, it's interesting. I tried for a while. I was journaling and I never looked back at it. And one day I thought, I should go back and read what I wrote. And it shocked me how most of it was geared around one topic that I would have said was not a concern. So it
isn't
was
that
there.
crazy?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
didn't see it until I had that outsider's perspective of going, oh,
Right.
look what this
Yeah,
woman
interesting.
wrote. Yeah.
Exactly.
Oh, well, if there is a mompreneur, and I know there is, who's listening to
Mm,
this and is going, especially, I think you hit the nail on the head for us when we're like, I'm trying to build a business,
mm,
but
yeah.
do I have what it takes? Do I have any business even doing this? I'm
Yeah.
sacrificing, you know, my kids. I often say every business yes feels like a parenting no. And
Mm,
so, how,
good
they
point.
feel this tension between the two. What is one simple step that she could take today to kind of start working on this mindset shift and know that no, you're in the right spot, even if you don't feel
Mm.
like you are.
I think just understanding more about her calling in this season. What is it that you feel called to do? And that's different from the calling you might have on your life overall.
Mm,
What is the calling that you have in this specific season that God has put before you?
mm,
Is it to do all of these things that you have before you? It might be.
mhm,
Or is it to spend more time with your kids? It might be that. It
mhm.
doesn't, that's something that you and God have to work out, but to not but to just learn and kind of discover what that is and learn to just be curious before God about what that
Mhm,
is and to step boldly into that, either side, whatever it is, because
mhm.
that's God's calling for you. We can run to work because we're frustrated with kids in school and how things are going, right? Homeschooling, things like that. I did that for
Right.
13 years. I understand homeschooling very much and how we can just be like, I need to do something else because this is driving me nuts, right?
Yep.
Or we can run away from a professional calling
Mhm,
because we're afraid of it and we know being with the kids and working with them, like, we understand that. So I think we can run to either extreme. So it
mhm,
comes down to what is God saying he wants for me to do right now, and then to have the confidence to step into that
mhm.
and keep focused on that.
And what I love about that is that it removes that I should be.
Mhm.
Because now it's no, this is what I'm to do, not,
Yeah.
I should be doing this other thing. No, you shouldn't.
Yes.
Is if that's
Yes.
not what God is calling you to right now, then no, you shouldn't. So,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, that's really, really helpful.
Perfect.
This
Yeah.
is really interesting and intriguing. I grew
Good.
up in a pastor's home, and so I
Mm.
had the pressure of all the church people looking at me and,
Mm.
analyzing and determining whether my behavior reflected on my father. And so everything was
Wow. Yeah.
important. So, you came to faith, you said at 19, but
Mhm.
I had all these things. And so I've learned as I've grown how much I had mixed up biblical truth with
Yeah.
human perspective. And so
Yes.
I've had a lot of untangling to do over the years, as
Mm.
well, because of some of those expectations and,
Yeah.
where things, where you were praised, like you were saying with your good grades and things like that. So this is a fascinating topic.
Mm.
And,
It is.
yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for
Um,
sharing that. Yeah.
yeah, well, and I'm glad you've been able to be with us. I've got to work on my transitions here because I get to this end part and then we go from these deep topics like, worth and identity to, so what is
That's
your
okay.
favorite
It's
time-saving
all
gadget
right.
or tool?
Oh, is that
But
the next question?
it
Oh
is.
gosh.
I'm a gadget girl. I love anything that is going to make life easier. And so if it's
Okay.
a system tool process, so I always love to find out what are my guests' favorite gadget tool or system.
Okay. Yes. I cannot live without Evernote. Do you know what Evernote is?
Yes.
Evernote is an app for those who may not know. It's an app and I guess you'd call it an app because you can get it
Mhm.
on your phone and on your computer. You can see it anywhere, and that's why I love Evernote. So it's just a place where you can gather anything. You can put some ideas you have about a certain project. You can put your grocery list in there. You have different folders that you can organize everything into. It's like a notes app they may have on your phone, but it's much more advanced in that you can put pictures in there. You can forward emails to it. I am a creative person, so I have ideas 24/7. I can have an idea at 3 a.m. for a podcast episode or for anything, a book idea or something, just constantly. Or maybe there's a book that's recommended to me. So I have different things that are categorized in my Evernote,
Mm,
and it's always with me because my phone is always with me. And
mhm,
I can just, oh gosh, let me write that down, and it's right there.
mhm.
And it goes from my computer to my phone. So I can see them both places.
Yep.
It's like everything runs through Evernote in my life. So
Oh, I love
I love
that.
Evernote.
I love that because, yeah, sometimes if you write it on a piece of paper, you lose the piece of
Oh,
paper or it's in that other
yes.
notebook
Oh
and
my
just
gosh.
keeps it all together. Can you share specific notes with people so, like, your
Yeah.
husband could see the grocery list and
Yes.
have it on his
You
phone?
can. It's
Okay.
so awesome. Yeah, you can share notes. You can they can share notes with you. Like I use it
Mm,
even if I'm going on a trip and I'm sending the flight details. I send it to my Evernote and then I can
mhm.
see it right on my phone. If like my husband's
Yes.
coming in tomorrow, I can see his flight details right there. Everything is there and you can share it. So I share it with my
Yeah.
assistant, some different lists or different check boxes or things. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Oh, that's
it's
wonderful.
awesome.
That's great. And my brain's going now with like, "Oh, here's where the chore list is gonna live, and I can see if
Yes.
you've checked it off, and I can
Yes.
know you didn't do it right."
Mhm. You can. Yeah, you can see
So,
back and forth. It's pretty awesome. Yeah.
that's wonderful. Oh, well, great. Well, where can
Mhm.
people, find you? And you've got something on their website your website
Mhm.
that people can download, right?
Yes, definitely. You can go to vibrantchristianliving.com. That's the hub for everything that all the work that I do. And you can find a free training there. So it's a series of trainings. Depending on when you're listening to it, we're about to change it to either be this one free big training or it'll be a series of smaller trainings. So depending what it is. But if you go to vibrantchristianliving.com/mind, you will see that. And then you can also see the podcast that's there as well. And you can listen to it on any major podcast player or there on the website. And I'm also on Instagram. So at Vibrant Christian Living, I would love to connect with you there. That's kind of my main dance floor to talk to everybody. So, yeah, so I would love to connect with you, especially around if you're feeling like these are some areas that you want to find some progress in, or you just, wow, this was enlightening to learn about this. How can I learn more? I would love to be able to talk to you and work with you in those ways.
Excellent. Well,
Yeah.
thank you so much, Alicia. Thanks for being here and
Thank
for sharing
you.
this. And I hope that a lot of listeners take advantage of what you have to offer because I think beyond just transforming a woman's mindset, like you said, transforms families and
Yes.
marriages and so much more. So
Right.
that's exciting work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. Well, thank you for letting me share today. I appreciate it.
Oh, my pleasure.